We are now going to talk about using dependency injection in controllers. Let's first define what is dependency injection and why is it useful. In software development, we are always striving to decouple our software, meaning that we can easily switch out parts of our application without changing any existing code. One of the ways we can do this is with dependency injection. As an example, Laravel allows us to automatically create and use objects by just defining them within our controller method parameters. This is a very handy feature because it takes away the messiness of performing all the overhead of instantiating our objects. The most obvious example of this is with the request object. Here, in this example, we can see that we just defined the object request within the method parameter, and Laravel will create it and have it available to us. Laravel does this using a thing called reflection. It's beyond the scope of this course and exam, but if you're interested, you can Google it. The really nice thing about dependency injection is if we want to swap out the request object with another object that we have created, for example, request2, we can do this. As long as the request2 object accepts the same methods and returns the same type of responses from those methods, we can do it. Now, an even better way of doing this is by defining an interface. An interface in PHP, as I'm sure you know, defines a contract that an object must abide to. That way, we can create two objects that implement the same interface, making sure that we can swap them out if and when we need to. We can go even further than this and define an interface to an object. So let's do that now. Let's create an interface called testing interface. And let's define a method called print. Now let's create two objects, test1 and test2. Let's implement the interface to these two objects, making sure that we implement the print method. Each print method will return a slightly different response. Now, we want to tell Laravel that we want to bind the interface testing interface to the object test1. We can do this inside a service provider. Service providers will be talked about further in a future video. But for now, let's just quickly see how we would bind testing interface to test1. If we look at the documentation, we can see that we have to add the following code within the service provider, specifically the boot method. Now that we've done that, we should be able to dependency inject it within our controller, specifically the tickets index method. So let's type hint our method's parameter to testing interface, variable test, and return the method print. Let's now visit this route and see what the response we get. Great, we are getting the response from the test1 print method. Now let's go back to the service provider and switch it to test2. We don't need to make any changes to the controller's method index because we are type hinting the interface, not the object. That's the great thing about dependency injection. Let's again visit the tickets route. Great, we now see test2 response. I hope you can see how useful this can be in a real application. Let's say you are using a database interface that points to MySQL. But later, down the road, your boss says he wants to switch to Postgres. As long as both objects implement the same interface and return the same things, you can just update the binding within your service provider. That's pretty powerful. Before we end this video, I want to quickly touch upon using middleware within your controller. You already know what middleware is and how it's applied within the routes file. However, sometimes it's useful to apply it to the controller. We can do this within the construct method of the controller. As you've done middleware in the previous video, this should be pretty self-explanatory, but in this example, the first line tells Laravel to apply the middleware auth to all methods. The second line tells Laravel to apply this middleware only to the index method. And finally, the third line tells Laravel to apply that middleware to every method except the store method. Great! I hope this is all beginning to make a lot of sense to you now. As with every section, I want to keep emphasizing that you should try and build this stuff. Otherwise, everything you've learned will fade away. and we want to apply what we've learned not just to pass the exam, but to our real life projects too. Once you've studied the controllers section, please move on and take the quiz.